Study 143. Luxury couples' formative moments, the intersection of art collecting and romantic love, from the Objects of Affection collection. On romance as provenance, the collector couple as a narrative device, and the material obligations a love story is engineered to obscure. The headline is a genre unto itself. For this couple, falling in love sparked a lifelong journey of art collecting. It arrives already softened, already resolved, a sentence built to be agreed with before it is read. Johanna and Friedrich Grafling, she trained in art history, he an architect, both Frankfurt-based and by the market's reckoning. Young met in London more than a decade ago and began almost immediately to live surrounded by art. Today their holdings run to something between 400 and 650 works, depending on which profile you read and on which afternoon the count was taken. The story the luxury press tells about them is a story about feeling. Our task is to tell the story about obligation that the feeling is arranged to cover. This is not a debunking. The Graflings are, by a wide margin, better custodians than the archetype they are made to sell. But the archetype itself, the collector couple as living proof that accumulation is really just love with a longer receipt, is a market instrument, and it deserves to be read as one. The romance sells the asset. Every asset class requires a cover story, and the more illiquid the asset, the warmer the story has to be. Contemporary art is among the most illiquid assets a private household can hold, and so its cover stories are among the warmest on offer: passion, journey, connoisseurship, a shared life measured out in acquisitions. The romantic profile of the collector couple performs a specific economic function. It converts a balance sheet into a biography. It lets the accumulation of appreciating property read as the accumulation of shared memory. We have named the end point of that conversion the hollowed object, the work whose meaning has been drained out and replaced with price, provenance, and the thin residue of a story about how it was acquired. The romantic narrative is the machinery of hollowing operating in reverse gear. It reinflates the object with sentiment precisely at the moment its market value makes sentiment suspect. When a painting is worth a year's salary, the phrase, "we simply fell in love with it," is not a description. It is a defense. The love story is not the opposite of the transaction. It is the transaction's most sophisticated packaging. Notice what the romantic frame quietly forbids. It forbids the question of exit, of what becomes of the works when the couple is gone. A love story has no chapter for the estate sale. By narrating a collection as the biography of a marriage, the genre installs a full stop exactly where the difficult institutional questions begin. Succession, dispersal, the transfer of custody, the eventual return of the object to circulation. The warmth of the story is very nearly proportional to the silence it keeps about endings. None of this is unique to the Graflings. It is the ambient grammar of collecting itself, the same grammar that lets a Manhattan townhouse be described as a living art installation rather than a very expensive place to keep expensive things. What makes the Graflings worth a full study is that, having inherited this grammar, they proceed to violate several of its most profitable rules. Roman 2. The couple who read the contract. It helps to remember where the collection began, because the beginning was not grand. Johanna and Friedrich met in London more than a decade ago and staged their first exhibitions in their own shared apartment, moving the furniture aside during Frieze Week, on one occasion lining the carpets with the silver foil peeled from milk cartons to suit an installation. The collection did not start as a portfolio. It started as hospitality, a household rearranged, repeatedly, to make room for an artist's work. That origin is the strongest thing the Graflings have going for them, and it is worth holding onto as the numbers climb. The first violation is patience. Friedrich Grafling has said plainly that it is always years before we add an item to the collection, and that roughly 85% of the time they come to know the artist before they acquire the work. This is not how the accelerated market behaves. The accelerated market rewards the collector who buys early, buys fast, and flips before the primary paint is dry. Years-long deliberation is, in market terms and inefficiency, a refusal of liquidity. We would call it something else. We would call it the beginning of a custodian's contract, the recognition that to hold a work is not to own it outright, but to accept temporary, conditional responsibility for it. The Graflings collect an artist's oeuvre in depth rather than acquiring a single signature trophy. They follow a body of work across years, buying multiple pieces from different periods, treating the relationship rather than the object as the unit of collection. This is the structural inverse of the trophy purchase. It privileges conceptual depth over surface, sequence over spectacle. It is also quietly a wager against speculative velocity, the financial logic by which a work's price is decoupled from its material and conceptual reality, and set instead by the speed of its circulation. You cannot follow an oeuvre for a decade and flip it in a season. The two behaviors are mutually exclusive. To their credit, the Graflings have chosen the slower one, and yet patience alone does not dissolve the market. It merely postpones the collector's appointment with it. An oeuvre followed in depth for 10 years is still, at year 10, an oeuvre with a market price and a deeper, better documented holding than a scattered one. Custodial care pursued rigorously enough produces exactly the provenance that makes an eventual sale more valuable. The contract and the asset are not enemies here. They are uncomfortably collaborators. Roman 3. A wedding staged as a group show the second violation is intimacy, the deliberate binding of art to biography until the two cannot be separated for resale. The Graflings' wedding was, by their own account, a group show in itself. Alec Jaquaid designed their engagement ring, a curbstone jewel set with stones Friedrich had gathered from the gravel of their London driveway. Grace Weaver painted the couple as newlyweds. Christian Jankowski staged a video work in which a Dustin Hoffman lookalike moved among the guests. In their bedroom hang two paintings by Gregor Hildebrandt, made as gifts for the births of their children. In the dining room, the Weaver wedding canvas, very personal, Johanna has said, because this was our wedding gift. This is material singularity pursued to its logical extreme, works that are not merely unique but unique to this marriage, encoding events that happen to no one else. A ring made from the literal ground beneath a specific London house cannot be a fungible commodity. It is welded to a biography. This is what we mean by narrative permanence, the embedding of a life's event so deeply into an object's substance that the object can no longer circulate cleanly as an anonymous asset. A work commissioned to record your wedding is the hardest possible thing to sell, and that difficulty is precisely its custodial value. Consider even the medium of the birth paintings. Gregor Hildebrandt works with the physical stock of recorded media, cassette tape, vinyl, materials that once carried sound and now hold only their own dark, mirrored surface. To mark a child's birth with a work built from spent recording tape is to choose material memory as a substance, an image made from the very stuff of playback and erasure. The Graflings did not commission a portrait. They commissioned a monument in a medium that is itself about what time does to a recording. Here the Graflings are at their most persuasive, and we should say so without hedging. A commissioned birth painting resists the market not through a legal covenant, but through sheer specificity of meaning, the labour density of an artist's sustained attention aimed at a private event. But specificity is a soft defence. Meaning that lives only in the collector's heads is meaning that evaporates at the estate sale, when the biography is gone and only the Quaid, the Weaver, and the Hildebrandt remain, now merely signed works by names the market knows. Sentiment is not a mechanism. It protects an object only for as long as the people who hold the sentiment do. Roman 4. Tranen, or How to Destroy a House You Own. The third violation is the most radical, and it is the one the romantic profile tends to mention last, if at all. In 2015 the Graflings had Michael Sailstorfer demolish a house they owned, struck apart with a wrecking ball cast in the shape of a tear. The resulting video work, Tranen, Tears, now belongs to the permanent collection of the Stadel Museum in Frankfurt. Read this against the standard collector behavior and its strangeness comes into focus. The ordinary logic of the asset is preservation for appreciation. You protect the object because the object is the store of value. Sailstorfer's commission inverts every term. The material object, the house, is destroyed on purpose as the artwork's condition of existence. And the resulting work is not kept private but deposited into a public institution, removed from the household's liquidatable holdings and placed under the museum's permanent care. This is the gesture our whole framework has been trying to name. A private couple converts a piece of their own real property into a work of art whose meaning is loss, and then transfers that work out of private hands into public custody. It is the opposite of privatization. It is a household voluntarily accepting the burden of preservation, and then handing that burden to an institution built to carry it in perpetuity. If more collecting ended this way, the selection memo's charge, that private collecting removes cultural assets from the public domain, would need substantial revision. We should be careful not to overread a single work. One donated video does not neutralize 600 privately held objects, but Tranen demonstrates that the Graflings understand, in at least one instance, the difference between owning a thing and being responsible for it, and that they know where responsibility, fully discharged, is supposed to lead. V. The salon and the bell, a correction the romantic profiles routinely fail to make. Salon Kennedy. The exhibition space the Graflings founded in Frankfurt in 2013 is not a display of their collection. It is a separate curatorial project, a program of changing shows, collaborations, and events staged in a historic apartment adjacent to their living space, a room you enter by ringing a bell, which obliges a conversation. The collection and the salon are adjacent, not identical. To conflate them, as the coverage tends to, is to credit the private holdings with the public generosity of the program. What is Salon Kennedy, then, in our terms? At its best, it is close to what we have called route marketing, the cultivation of an artistic community through direct, unhurried encounter, rather than the amplified spectacle of the fair booth. A bell that forces a conversation is the antithesis of the art fair's frictionless transaction. It slows the aura transaction down to the speed of a handshake. But we would be poor dialecticians if we stopped at the flattering reading. A private salon in a prestigious apartment, hosting the right artists for the right guests, is also an engine of social distinction in the exact sense Pierre Bourdieu described. Taste deployed as a marker of position, cultural capital converted into standing. The generosity is real and the distinction is real, and they are produced by the same gesture. The salon is not a spectacle of curated experience sold to strangers. It is something more intimate and in its way more effective, a community that confers status precisely because it does not appear to be trying to. VI 650, which returns us to the number and to the tension where this argument actually lies. Whatever the exact figure, 400, 650, it is a large number, and it includes what the trade calls major names: Alec Jaquaid, Michael Sailstorfer, Laura Prouvost, Jorinde Voigt. These are artists whose works command significant sums, and a deep holding of them is, as a matter of arithmetic, a significant concentration of value regardless of the warmth with which it was assembled. This is the point our 12-agent council kept circling, and it is correct. Intention does not exempt scale from the market's gravity. A collection large enough and blue-chip enough to matter is, by that very fact, entangled in speculative velocity whether or not its owners ever intend to sell. Its existence shifts prices. Its documentation deepens provenance. Its eventual dispersal, and every collection is eventually dispersed, will move markets the owners can no longer control. Long after the love story that justified it has been forgotten by everyone but the auction cataloguer, who will reprint it as a selling point. Asked once to name the thread running through the whole collection, the Graflings reportedly chose a single word: time. It is the right word and a revealing one. Time is what an oeuvre followed in depth a cruise. Time is what Tranen freezes at the instant of a house's destruction. Time is also, precisely, what the market discounts to a present value. The same medium that makes their collecting meaningful is the medium in which it silently appreciates. They cannot hold the one without underwriting the other. There is a structural captivity at work that no amount of personal virtue escapes. The collector who follows an artist's oeuvre in depth out of genuine devotion is also simultaneously, unavoidably, building the deepest and most valuable position in that artist's market. The devotion and the position are the same act seen from two angles. This is not hypocrisy. It is structure, and structure is not answered by feeling, it is answered only by form. Romans 7. What would make the covenant binding here, we must be precise, and mark the boundary between what the evidence shows and what the institution proposes. The evidence shows a couple whose collecting is unusually patient, unusually intimate, and capable, at least once, of the full custodial gesture of public deposit. The evidence does not show that patience and intimacy are sufficient to insulate a collection from the market. That sufficiency is not a finding. It is exactly the claim our own reviewer flagged as unsupported, and we let it stand corrected here. Sentiment, however deep, is not a mechanism of insulation. What would be form? An anti-sale covenant attached to a work by contract rather than by feeling, a binding instrument specifying that a piece may not be resold, or may be resold only into public or non-profit custody. Deposit agreements, like the one that carried Tranen into the Stadel, applied deliberately and in advance rather than as a one-off. Metrics of care, conservation records, artist relationships, archival documentation, treated as the collection's real ledger, ranked above its market valuation. These are the codifications that would convert a private couple's admirable instincts into an enforceable public good. They are what turn a love story into a contract. A collector's good intentions die with the collector. Only form survives the estate sale. The Graflings, more than most, appear to sense this. The gift to the Stadel is the tell, the moment where instinct reached for the one instrument that actually binds. Our critique is not that they have failed. It is that they, and every collector like them, hold a power they mostly leave unexercised, the power to make the covenant legal, and thereby to make it last longer than a marriage, a memory, or a market cycle. Coda. The romantic headline was never wrong exactly. The Graflings did fall in love, and their life together is genuinely bound up in the objects they have gathered. But love, as the market has learned to exploit it, is a story that ends at the collector's own lifespan, and the objects do not. They persist, appreciate, disperse, and re-enter circulation, carrying their little biographies as provenance notes that add a premium at the block. The question OAC asks of every collection is not whether it was assembled with feeling. It is what happens to the feeling when the people who felt it are gone. The Graflings have written, in the case of one demolished house, an answer worth keeping. The remaining 600 works are still, for now, a love story in search of a contract. The full study is available at objectsofaffectioncollection.com.